Hello, everybody. Time for tips, topics, issues, and positions. Bob Oxley here, and time for another episode. And this is going to be interesting because we're going to talk about the government shutdown and also the wall. All right. I fortunately, if you remember, about 30 days ago, we were in the middle of a government shutdown. And I invited two experts to come in and talk about what the ramifications were, short-term and long-term, as far as the shutdown was concerned. And the shutdown was still ongoing when they left. And I said, why don't we get back together in about 30 days and find out where we're at? And so that's what we're doing. And so I've invited back Professor Joe Green and Dr. Chip McLeod, who is the chair for the History and Political Science Department here at Dixie State University. So, gentlemen, welcome back.
Hi, Bob.
It's been 30 days. Okay, first of all, the government shutdown ended. The president said, okay, enough's enough. And
I believe we anticipated the reason when we were here 30 days ago.
And that was?
President Trump was concerned that the inspection officers at the airport, particularly LaGuardia in New York, planes were backing up because they didn't have enough inspectors in the end, and so it was going bad. His poll numbers were going down. I think Chip and I both predicted that something like that would happen because some of these federal agencies actually are necessary to make things keep going, and so.
But at least he can now tell the truth about a first, because indeed it was the longest government shutdown. That nice feather in his cap.
Wow, if you want to call it that. I mean, there was a lot of upset people that were not getting paid, and a lot of, for instance, the air traffic controllers were being told, you will come to work without pay, and a lot
and some minor but noteworthy damage to the economy that we can't retrieve. We can't get that back.
And that's what we were waiting to see, like, what is that going to be? And we did see some negative as a result. Fast forward, here we are today. The president has, first of all, let me go back, take a step back. Congress got together and bipartisan came up with a plan for the president to agree to, as far as the wall was concerned, and it was a long-term for the fiscal monies available for a lot of programs. But what they came up with is the president was asking for $5.7 billion for the wall, 2,000 miles worth of the wall. What the bipartisan group came together came up with a plan that represented 1.3 or $1.4 billion and 55 miles of fencing, a little bit less than the 2,000 requested. So
I don't think they ever said we're going to do how long they said that the $5 billion was for, but all he would ever say about it was, I've talked to the border agents and the ICE people, and this is what they say they need, so this is how much. But I don't know if they I think they backed off the idea that there would be a wall all the way along the border.
That's what he was asking for, I think.
Yeah.
He wanted that.
Well, that gets complicated because there are so many parts of the fairly lengthy border between the U.S. and Mexico that you'd have a really hard time building a conventional wall, and where would you put it, and the terrains in question and whatnot. But I think by and large, Joe's correct. It was about the money, and then we'll figure out where we're going to build whatever we think we need to build.
He did say it was going to be in Texas, which is often really a problem because the crisis at the border that he's talking about, other than drug dealers and MS-13 gang members coming in, the primary big logistical problem they're having is people who come from Central America, and instead of trying to get away from the border control agents, They're here to declare asylum. So all they have to do under U.S. law is set foot on American soil, and they can ask for asylum, which means they get a hearing, and there's such a backup that it takes 3 years to get the hearing, which essentially means they're here in the United States and disappear, don't show up for their hearing. That's at least the story. So if you build a wall in Texas, you've got to build it in the along the Rio Grande River, and you can't build it in the floodplain of the Rio Grande River, or it doesn't work. That is, you can't build it right on the border. You can in New Mexico and Arizona and California, but in Texas you can't. It means you have to build it behind the border. That means if a family comes from Honduras, gets across the river, they get to stand on ground. The wall's still 10 feet or 20 feet or 30 feet back. They get to declare asylum. The wall doesn't help. The wall doesn't stop them.
And that's just the beginning. There are problems like that all over the place. And
what's the name of the big canyon there at the Big Bend Canyon?
I'm trying to recall.
There are places there where it's 1,100 feet up on one side, 900 feet up on the other. To build a wall means you build it up on top of the plateau. There's the river way down there. Nobody's ever going to try to cross.
So ultimately, it's get the money, and if there were ever devils in details, that's what this is about.
Yeah. The proposal that they put on President Trump's desk from the Congress had a lot of things built in, sophisticated drones and all kinds of. Also, part of that $1.4 billion was to address the conditions of the people being held. In other words, the cages themselves. For the very first time, according to some people that review this this is the first time they got so specific as far as the holding tanks and how they were going to be held and people being
number of beds they'll fund,
everything,
that kind of thing.
And based on what they had witnessed and observations and reports that just has transpired over the last year. Very interesting, the 1.4. So Congress puts this together. McConnell says, Mr. President, here it is, and it's been sitting around his desk for about 2 or 3 days. And as of this morning, the president has made a decision, and that is he going to sign it or not?
Oh, he had to sign it.
Okay, why did he have to sign it?
Because he's running for re-election, and he can't have another government shutdown. His poll numbers went up after he gave the State of the Union, which was for the kinds of speeches that President Trump gives. Fairly bipartisan in the way that he did it. He offered Democrats a lot of stuff that probably made a lot of Republicans really uncomfortable. But his poll numbers went up, it looked like, and that's the strategy they have is he's going to look reasonable, and they're going to try and make the Democrats take on the message of the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wing, the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. They're going to try and turn the whole Democratic Party into those people, and they think that by painting them as extremists, he'll look like a moderate. If he shut down the government again, he doesn't look like a moderate. He really had no choice. He didn't want to shut the government down again. That harmed him. It didn't harm the Democrats.
And now what we have is a situation where he's averted that. The government's funded through September, and now, as we'll get to, I'm sure, the rub is whether he's going to get away with declaring a national emergency.
Right, which brings us to the next phase. So the president has signed the agreement, the $1.4 billion, which is a part of a total government spending bill that takes us through the end of this fiscal year.
Can I correct one thing?
Go ahead.
The bill passed the House last night, so it's only been on his desk.
Oh, okay.
It came over last night, so.
But he was anticipating what was coming. Is that right?
Yeah, because the Senate passed the language 2 days ago, or yesterday morning or something. So the language was written, and when they write the language, they always have members, or usually have members of the administration there trying to work out the language stuff. So he knew what was in it. He thinks there's a lot of poison pills in it, and bad things that but the Freedom Caucus is going to complain about Laura Ingram's going to say he's a traitor to because of all that's in it. But anyway, he signed it this morning, and then I gather I've been in class. He signed the declaration of an emergency. Is
okay,
that?
which is the next thing I want to get to. Let's put that right on the table. My understanding is it's going to represent. This is all in the last hour. I'm getting information in myself. Is that it represents approximately $8 billion. He wanted 5.7. The bill that he just signed represents 1.4 with no wall provision per se, except from fencing. And now he has instituted a national emergency.
I think he gets 50 miles of wall.
I think somewhere between 50 and 55 maybe, but not much.
Yeah.
Even with the national emergency monies? That just with the bill.
That's in the bill.
Okay, but that's what triggered this off. He signed that bill because he wasn't going to hold up government spending. It was attached to a number of other things for the balance of this fiscal year. Now,
well, he's doing an end run, if you will, that's sanctioned by. I'm sure everybody's looking into it now. A piece of legislation enacted in 1976 that other presidents have attempted to use, but then there's a whole line of stipulations as to whether he'll be allowed to do it. Congress can get involved. There are all kinds of ways to stop him. If there's a 2/3 majority fundamentally against it, then there's not a whole lot he can do. But
I thought it was a pure majority. That is all they need.
No, it's got to be veto proof.
Oh, but they can bring up a resolution under the law.
Right. What we're
telling him he can't do it.
What we're talking about is Congress being best positioned to sue if Congress has to.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you need a veto-proof majority in this case for Congress to make a good case. And there are several ways they can approach a lawsuit. It's actually pretty complicated.
The House Republicans sued President Obama over the way he initiated the Affordable Care Act. So one thing, Nancy Pelosi could just have the Democrats in the House as the House sue and say, you're spending money, it's not being spent the way we appropriated it, you violated the law. The Supreme Court took that case. So courts took it.
Well, in this instance, by him declaring a national emergency, correct me if I'm wrong, this was 1976, which you referred to, whereby Congress actually relinquished some of the powers that they had to the president so they could be responsive to national disasters.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it's designed to take care of national disasters when Congress can't act quickly and the president has to do. There's fires in California, and you've got to get. We're running out of budget money because we've already fought a whole bunch of fires. We need more money.
And it's one of those laws that's, I guess, of necessity, ambiguous. I mean, it's going to be interpreted now, depending on the reaction ultimately in Congress to Trump's declaring what he regards as a national emergency. And, of course, a lot of the dialogue has to do, very interestingly and importantly, with is this a national emergency? Well,
some of the feedback that I received in the last 30 minutes is that there's been already some pushback saying this is not a national emergency. We just had all 13 agencies represented as far as potential threats to the United States, and the caravan situation was way down the list as far as priorities.
Well, again, this whatever else it is, it's Trumpian politics at the Trumpiest. That's his back's against the wall. He can't let his staunchest supporters down on this, and that's why he's doing it.
Wow. I know it's really we're right on the bleeding edge right here. Things are just happening as we're talking here on the air, so our listeners understand this. But what have you heard thus far in the last 60 minutes as far as where is this $8 billion coming from that he's proclaiming he has?
He said Mulvaney, his budget chief, they started looking for this during the shutdown, because this is, they knew that they could see the handwriting on the wall. They're going to have to end the shutdown, which they did by doing a continuing resolution for 3 weeks. So the government was funded for 3 weeks while they negotiated this bill. And so he had his accountants and his lawyers looking through all of the appropriations to find money. And evidently, there's lots of discretionary money in federal budgets, the way that Congress writes it for emergencies, that kind of thing. And Mulvaney's found $8 billion that Trump says that President Trump says I can use this to build my wall and whatever else that he wants to do with it. The members of Congress, including some Republicans, are going to push back and say we appropriated that, and the discretion was supposed to be for this kind of an area, not for the kind you're going to use it for. So I don't think he's going to have even I know he's not going to have a solid Republican majority. He's going to split the Republicans over this issue.
And for anybody who's not following this blow by blow, minute by minute, the overwhelming majority of the money he thinks he's found that he can use is coming from defense.
From the Department of Defense.
They have a construction fund. The Corps of Engineers has construction money. They usually use it in emergencies or to help out a city or some favored entity that build a canal or build a road or something like that. And
that's where people were looking all along. In fact, when people started inquiring about the little snafu, if Congress doesn't go along and he pulls something like this, where are you going to get the money? That's what came up first, and evidently that's where he's going for it.
Wow. Okay, so let me take it. You already mentioned this, Professor Green, about the Supreme Court. Let's say that the Congress implements and saying, wait a minute, you can't do this. This is against the Constitution. And you mentioned about the 1976 law that gave some of those powers away. So it goes to the Supreme Court. What's the likelihood that the Supreme Court will say, Mr. President, you cannot do this?
The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to go to a federal district court, probably in California.
Right.
And that court's going to stop the president from moving the money around until the courts can decide if he can do it. Then it's going to take it could take a couple of years. They could fast track it, but it could take a couple of years, and to go through the appeals process to get to the court. And then the court has to decide what national emergency means and under what circumstances a president may declare it and under what circumstances he may not. If they decide to take the case on those broad grounds, they may decide to narrow the grounds on which they make a decision or something, but we won't know for a while.
Well, the really interesting thing along with that, because the court process, as everybody understands, I'm pretty sure could be long, drawn out. First thing I would ask is, what is the president going to do should that happen? Because he's still got, once again, it seems like kind of a no-brainer, but you can't lose sight of the fact that this is mostly political for him. If you had a candid conversation with him, I don't know whether he really believes there's some crisis at the border or whether this is a national emergency. He's kind of a politician as a novice even, but this once again is the ultimate political hot potato for him. And to imagine, let's say Joe's right, he could very well be a 2-year period of time where there's no money forthcoming for the wall.
By signing the bill, that's taking care of the financial side of the house. We're going to
fund the government, but not build a wall.
That could be just dragged right through the courts.
Well, again, and just to reiterate, because I think it's that important, that's 2 years, year and a half, whatever we're talking about, when the people who are still hanging on to that promise from Trump that we're going to build a wall on the southern border, they're not getting their wall. So 2020 begins to look a little different, perhaps.
Yeah, I would think so.
But politically, maybe he's thinking he wins both ways. If if for some reason he could spend the $8 billion or part of the $8 billion, and he's got 1.6 to start with now while he waits, then he can say, hey, look, in spite of all of the pushback and Nancy Pelosi saying she wouldn't give me $1, I've built your wall. Mm-hmm. And if he can't, then he can go and talk about a do-nothing Congress and, I did everything I could, but you've seen what they've done to me, kind of a thing.
Fire up his base to the point that they're so angry they vote for him anyway.
I try to do the best possible. I try to do the right thing.
They wouldn't let me.
They wouldn't let me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. So you've got that 31 to 33%. His base, no matter what he says or does, they're going to go along with it.
Trump's beginning to look more Teflon-y than Reagan.
Yeah. And then if you match that's what a lot of his supporters are really after, is this trade and his immigration stuff. That's his populist base, that 30 whatever percent it is that stays with him.
It's up to 44 now.
Yeah,
again.
Yeah, but the increase, the people who stayed with him even during the shutdown, are his base. What he did in the State of the Union is he talked about Green New Deals and socialism and all of this stuff we're going to do. We're going to control drug prices, and we can build better freeways, and that made him look, he thinks, moderate compared to who he's running against.
Well, to the extent that those numbers have meaning, and sometimes that's tough. The only point I was making was that that's what he sought to do with the State of the Union, and he went from, I believe, 37 back to something like 44, so that he did what he wanted to do.
Wow.
But
go ahead, Joe.
The initial polling, I think you cited this to me this morning, is big majority of the American people, 60%, 50-something percent.
This morning, you mean?
Do not like the idea of a national emergency.
That's 66%.
Right.
And a whole bunch of Republicans don't like declaring a national emergency.
And I don't have a number. Did either of you two get a number on that side, the Republican side? Because I heard that there's some dissatisfaction in members of the Senate and the House.
They're not talking. That hasn't changed. And a name or two or three will pop out occasionally, or you might hear somebody quote, maybe there are a couple dozen who agree to say something negative upon an agreement of anonymity or whatever, but nobody's saying much.
Okay.
But there's a provision in the this 1976 legislation that's been used once that would allow the Congress to, by a majority vote, to tell the president that he can't do this if you can get a majority in both houses. Now, he could veto that. And in that case, then you need 2/3 to override.
And this
whatever.
is the way we started about the anti-veto, veto protected.
Think about getting to 50%, 50.1% in the Senate is going to require all the Democrats will vote for it, but it's going to require some Republican votes, and I'll bet they're there. Right. I'll bet Ben Sass would vote to put this down. He's a constitutionalist. Well, I'm guessing Romney might, just because he doesn't like President Trump very much.
Ron Paul's talking too.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Ron Paul's involved with this too. Gentlemen, I hate to tell you, I just got the high sign.
Oh no!
Believe it or not, I said this would fly by. So it's exciting. I'm glad you came in. Our timing is perfect. We knew this a month in advance, didn't we? This was all going to happen on today. We're going to have to get back together. What do you think? Should we get back together maybe in 30 days, possibly?
You run this show, no pun intended.
Honestly, I didn't have any connections with the White House. Says, please hold off until the 15th so I get...
We'll do whatever you want.
Yeah, we're at your beck and call.
All right, everybody. I think I'm going to get a lot of positive input. So, yeah, bring those guys back. This is great. So, listen... Professor Green and Dr. McLeod, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules, coming back, and just anticipate 30 days from now, find out where we're at the next phase of this wonderful scenario. We'll probably call it Government Shutdown / the Wall and whatever the new verbiage that we're going to be using.
There'll be something new by then.
I would think so, the way things are going.
There'll be something new tomorrow.
Yeah, I would think so. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes Tips for this week. You can hear this program at 3 o'clock every Friday, and again, rebroadcasted at 5 p.m. on Saturday on KDXI 100.3 FM, as well as you can look up on our, if you go to radiostgeorge.com, that's our new website, and it'll have everything available for you. You just have to punch a button for whether it be Facebook or Twitter or our podcast with Podbean. Everything is there, believe it or not. And you can even go back and take a look at the previous time these two gentlemen were with us and then add it on to today's show. So everything's there now for you. And once again, thank you very much for tuning in. And on behalf of everybody here at KDXI Studios, please have a safe and enjoyable day. Goodbye now.